Hello, this is Christina Caudill with Radiant Astrology, and I'm so excited about this episode because we will be talking about dreams and astrology. This is the third episode in our series of dreams and astrology, and this one we are going to analyze two dreams and the natal charts of people who submitted them that were during the solar eclipse around March 29th. 2025. So that should be very interesting. And I have my good friend and partner in dream analysis, Melissa Lafara from Energetic Principles. Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Yes, of course. There's nothing that gets me more excited these days than talking about dreams and astrology together. Yeah, let's jump into these eclipse dreams. We've been getting such great submissions, right, Christina? There's just
Yeah.
fascinating.
I know, and thank you everyone who has submitted your dreams. We hope to be able to use them as much as we can in future episodes. We thought that with Neptune at the time was like at the very end of Pisces, it would be the perfect time to sort of open the floodgates of dreams. And so thank you, and thank you especially Mel. You went on Instagram and made a call, and that's where we got a lot of our dreams from. So thank you to fans of energetic principles.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to ask, entice people. I know you're dreaming out there, and I know you want to share them with us. And I'm glad people did.
And also, I know that you said, Melissa, that your friends had said thank you for encouraging me to pay attention to my dreams. And I know, like I said before on that first episode we had on dreams and astrology, before I started taking this dream school we were both in, I was like, how am I going to do this? I don't remember my dreams, but it really is. It's amazing. It's just about intention. Now they come just about every single night, fast and furious. So believe me, if you've never paid attention to your dreams, it is absolutely possible to start doing so. All right. So are you ready to dive into our first dream?
Yes, take it away.
Okay, so I'll read the dream first and a little bit of content on the dream and some context on the dream. And we'll discuss that first and then we'll fold in the astrology. So, this first dream is from a 49-year-old woman. She says she works for a wine importer. And here's the dream. I woke up from this dream in the early morning of March 29, which happened to be the solar eclipse in the early morning. I was swimming in the ocean and was trying to save a baby sea otter. The water was warming, and the sea otter was starting to slow and lose consciousness. I scooped it up in my hands and climbed out of the water and was pleading with a man on the beach, looking for cooler water. He suggested a small pool next to the ocean and told me to get the otter in there. I placed the baby otter in the pool and put my foot in to test the water. The water in this pool was much warmer, and I panicked and I rescued it and took it back to the ocean, which felt cool by comparison. When I woke up, I was in discussion again to brainstorm about how to cool the water for all of the sea creatures. And the feelings in the dream, she says there was a strong feeling of urgency, as well as an overwhelming feeling of tenderness and awe of the sea otter. It was so small it fit in the palm of my hand and was very soft. When we asked about any life context of the dream, she said, I just went into menopause and have been having hot flashes at night, so the warm water parts make sense. All right. So let's see, Mel, what stands out for you as you reflect on this dream?
Ooh, so much. Where do we begin? Well, the first thing that sticks out to me, if it were my dream, I I know I'm noticing the differences of sort of opposites where we have hot and we have cold, warm and cool, which makes a lot of sense when we think about our solar eclipse just because it's in Aries, but we have so much going on in Pisces. But then I also think about the ocean being this large, massive, never-ending body of water, and then we have a small pool that's very contained. So we have this small and large context going on. And the when I think of baby otters, when I think of otters just in general, otters are so playful. They're so light. They're like swimming on their backs, they're twirling rocks, they're always, hugging up on each other. Like they're very inner childlike animals to me. So uh, this scooping it up and noticing it's in too warm of water, and her also feeling this sense of awe of the animal but also tenderness, and it's very soft. So it's giving me sort of these vulnerability type of themes as well. um and yeah, those are the first things that come to mind. And getting it from hot, cold, getting some cool, definitely an emotional content, right? We're talking about water. So emotions are number one here.
Mhm. So yes, and what we said before is one of the first things we look at in dream analysis is where is this taking place? The place, and that might have something to do with, what it's insinuating about the area of life of the person. So the ocean is the main thing. She was swimming in the ocean. She's opened saying in the dream, and I guess she came upon the otter, or she realized that there was an otter that needed to be saved. And the ocean, it's not any body of water would still be about, the emotional life, but the ocean is like limitless and vast, and we associate that with the unconscious, and like the emotional life, of the unconscious as well, and the soul, and all of these sort of eternal themes. And just thinking of it in terms of in the natural zodiac, we think of, the fourth house and Cancer, and then this mother instinct that she's having for, this baby otter. And she called it a baby sea otter. So it was both, a baby, little creature, and from the sea. And I looked it up because I didn't know too much about otters or sea otters, because there are different types of otters. But it says that the sea otter is, even though it can walk on land, it's capable of living exclusively in the ocean. And it said that female otters perform all tasks of feeding and raising offspring, and have occasionally been observed caring for orphaned pups. And it says much has been written about the level of devotion of sea otter mothers for their pups. A mother gives her infant almost constant attention, cradling it on her chest away from the cold water and attentively grooming its fur, because it's actually fur, not blubber, that keeps them warm. When foraging, she leaves her pup floating in the water, sometimes wrapped up in kelp to keep it from floating away. If the pup is not sleeping, it cries loudly until she returns. Mothers have been known to carry their pups for days after the pup's death, even, which I thought was really interesting. So there's this real, like this emotional connection. I don't know. This is the thing, when we research something that appears in a dream, the person might not consciously know these things. Maybe she never looked it up on Wikipedia, or maybe she never thought about otters before, but there's something in the collective unconscious that perhaps this reality that is happening in the animal world, in the natural world, has somehow made it through her unconscious. And the other thing is, at the time of the solar eclipse, around that time, and again, I don't know if she saw a news report on this or not. She could have, or she might not have. But in Wisconsin, there were two orphan pups. I mean, two sea otters that were missing for nearly 2 weeks, and they escaped from the zoo in Wisconsin. And actually, one of them was found on March 28th. So that night, before the solar eclipse, and it was returned to the zoo in Wisconsin, although the other one, still hadn't been found. So I
Mm.
just happened to find that when I was sort of Googling it. Um, so I think this sense of protection, and then also her going through menopause. When we go through menopause, we do finally there is an ending. We know that, especially in America, I think we always think, we can always have a baby if we want, and we can get, artificial insemination or whatever. We'll take care of that, in some way. And whether or not she had children, ever, when we know we kind of cross that threshold, that there is no going back, really. We cannot naturally have a child anymore. And, there is a little bit of a grieving process, I think, for a lot of women, whether or not you've ever wanted children. There is that sense of, what, that fertility cycle is ending and has ended. And what's interesting is where the she wanted the pup to not be in warm water, which I think it seems like that they do thrive in warm water. However, as she said, having hot flashes, the more you can be in cool, you just want more cool during that transition time. You want cool water, you want cool air. And so that could be something about, that transition that she's going through herself.
Yeah, that's it's always interesting when you hear news stories like that, or we all know the water is heating up, and that is very dangerous for actual sea creatures in our waking reality. And it's interesting how that collective unconscious energies can seep into dreams sometimes. Um, and what I found interesting with the dream in relation to um the man on the beach, right? I was thinking about the hot, the warming of the water, the cooling of the water, and if I were to break it down, if it were my dream, I would think the warming of the water are going to create maybe more heated emotional content versus cooling water can be more subdued or it seems like it was going to be a more comfortable situation to have a cooler scenario, which of course makes a lot of sense for hot flashes. But maybe in the emotional life of the dreamer, there's this need to um, cool the emotional self in some way because the idea is like bring this sensitive little baby sea otter into this. Yeah, the man's like, go put it in that pool over there. That makes sense. And then you put it in, and this containment of emotion, because it's small, is even hotter. So keeping whatever that content is contained is only exacerbating the issue. And then there's this pleading with the man, like, and we actually, Christine and I were talking about this the other day about the animus in a dream, where the opposite sex can function as an animus character and sort of that outward going male-like quality, or maybe do something about this. But the man is not taking any heed to that, right? Is it pleading, please, please do something, but nothing's happening. So I think that's kind of what's coming up for me is this kind of like this containment that's only making it hotter. And what does that do for the emotional state, especially when I think about otters being playful, connected, and yeah, just like this joyous creature and not all heated per se.
Yeah, I like what you said about the heating of the water and the heating of the emotion. And she said that she felt panic in the dream, like that. And so maybe there is something there about a panic and an urgency, that is coming through, maybe even for, the world. Obviously, we all are in some some level of panic, whether it's of nature or something else. And exactly that, like every character in the dream, you want to see how do they relate to me. um and it could be your own innocence, right? When we think about the baby sea otter, your own um innocence of self. And maybe that innocence of self, like there's no one to save you, you have to kind of save yourself. And the man on the beach, that's exactly it. The anima being like the male, sort of reflection of ourself that as women we tend to put it out on someone else or something else, because really our job is to integrate male and female. And he also was kind of, it sounded like he was basically like, oh, well, there's another pool over there, like not thinking it through, not caring about the temperature of the water. And she went to check. And to me, that's another thing. Like, I can't rely on the male side of myself or men or father figures or whatever to save me or to save what's precious to me, And in a way, I also think it could be one of these like a call to integrate, the whole self, caring for um, the inner child self, like because now these days, we have so many fires to put out. We also have this inner child that also needs to be cared for in ways that are more, um, tender and paying attention to that in ourselves that needs, that care and attention. All
Yeah.
right. So, are you ready to check out the chart?
Yeah, let's look at the chart.
Okay. So, what we will be looking at is the inner circle is the dreamer's natal chart, December 4, 1975 at 8:15 a.m. in Mountain View, California. And then we have a second circle that is the approximate time of the dream, so the transits. And then the third circle is the progression. So just to make it simple, we'll start with the natal chart and the transits during the time of the eclipse. And again, she said she woke up in the early morning hours, from this dream. So I put it at about 3 a.m. Pacific time, which interesting was the solar eclipse. I mean, look at that. The sun and the moon are at 8 degrees. So it's very close to exactness of that new moon solar eclipse. Um, and, very, pretty much within the neighborhood of her fifth house of children is one thing. The fifth house is children, and we're using whole signs, by the way. Children, creativity, pastimes, things that you enjoy, pleasure, even romance and things like that, they say. But and we've said this before that oftentimes something precious that you have to save or you have panic over, especially when it looks like a child or vulnerable, that can also be a creative impulse, like some kind of creative project or something you want to create in the world. And so, whether it's a literal child or issues around motherhood or mothering, all of these can be very much, around fifth house and fourth house as well, because you have that whole stellium in Pisces in her fourth house of home, family, roots, mothering, and those kinds of things. So by transit, this area of her chart is certainly being illuminated a lot.
Yeah, definitely. The when I looked at the chart, the first thing I thought of was like just inner child work, inner child like um just having pleasure in life and being able to nurture that. And because it's interesting having when you think about that area of the fifth house for this particular dreamer's chart, we see that Mars retrograde ruling it right on the descendant. And so I think about that man, looking to the man to help this baby otter or to help cool the water. And this person's not very helpful, right? So kind of like what we were talking about earlier is like looking outside for, the direction or the action can get a little muddled there. And then that solar eclipse trines her Sun Neptune
Sun,
conjunction
Neptune.
perfectly in the first. And, we think about Neptune being this place of the sea, the fire in the water. Once again, we're seeing this fire water, this heated water the ocean being very representative of Pisces, flowing in and coming back out in that fourth house space and sort of this deep inner emotional, right? We're talking a lot about emotions having to do with these water themes, the larger unconscious of emotions, but then also the containment of emotion with the small pool. And then that eclipse is also opposing that Pluto, that's near the midheaven in the 11th house. So makes me think of maybe these themes of work and career and responsibility, maybe, and changes there in service to pleasure or nurturing something new. And there's not a lot of water going on in this chart, right? When you look at it, we see a lot of fire. We see air. We see a good amount of air. We see some earth. And then we have Uranus and the North Node in Scorpio in the 12th house, right? So we're back to sort of this ocean theme. Scorpio, too, heated water. And so I was just thinking about the relationship with water for this dreamer and how it might be compartmentalized to more of this unconscious space and why we might experience this dream to begin with.
That is interesting because there's a lot of water by transit in her fourth house, but natally, it's like she could maybe at times feel overwhelmed by, all of the water culminating in this naturally, her water house, because Pisces rules her fourth house. And it's interesting that I love that you put together this career versus home versus, family. And again, the fifth house could also be relationship to mothering and motherhood and children. She's also having Pluto opposite her Saturn, and that is a tough transit because I'm going through it myself. I have a very similar, chart to this dreamer. And that is, a lot of times, with the Pluto being about this relentless force that is pressuring, applies pressure. And where's it applying pressure? It's opposing your Saturn, where Saturn is usually where we feel like this is where I have to, be more of an adult, and this is where I need structure and foundation in my life. And Pluto is slowly causing destruction to what we have always kind of clung to for stability. Um, and and that could very much be, areas of responsibility that are shifting and changing because of Saturn being about where we're responsible. And and those things that usually we build our whole lives around creating some kind of foundation and structure to our lives. And Pluto is really causing, and this has been obviously an ongoing thing, but it's still quite tight right now when that Mars comes up to oppose her Pluto. This will probably be like the third time that it's activating this Pluto Saturn opposition of the past couple of years. Um, and that may actually be kind of like a calling to, where her ambitions are in this area, because especially with Mars, coming up to the top of her chart, I think that there is a real question about where her, a growth and responsibilities are that might not have been something that, again, that she feels that she's had a lot of stability in. But ultimately, Pluto wants to strip things down to the very essentials so that, at this time and phase in life, we can be aware of things anew, aware of new structures and new, like even hierarchies and things like that that are worthy of aligning with so that we can create new structures in different ways that are appropriate for this time in our life. Um,
Mm.
and I also noticed that I mean, she's also in her Chiron return, which again is another sort of threshold of adulthood. And I've noticed that she's got Jupiter conjunct the IC, which typically it's either if they have a big family, whether it's the family they were, family um the family of origin or extended family or something like that. Jupiter expands things. It can be around the area of family. And that may or may not mean whether she herself had a lot of children. But I really sense with this eclipse, solar eclipse in the fifth house, and it's the final one in the series since 2023, right, of eclipses in Aries Libra, um, that there is a real understanding of there is a momentous change in here. That there might not be growth in that area in terms of your fertility, for instance, but fertility can still, I mean, this person who has Jupiter on the IC has fertility coming out in other ways, maybe not having babies, especially now, but there can still be this potential for growth in new ways. And it calls for that paying attention to it, salvaging something, saving something that's precious, and not letting it be just sort of waved away, kind of in the way the man in the dream did.
Yeah, well, and I want to know the man in the dream, because I'm picturing, and I don't know if it's what she actually dreamed, but I'm like, was it an old man? Because I would be very curious to know what kind of man it was, how old the man was, especially since there's this pressure on Saturn in the dream. If it was an old man, there'd be an interesting connection between the Pluto and the Saturn. And if you'd have put in the progressions with it,
I'll do that now. Yeah.
you'll see that the progressed Sun and the progressed
Wow.
Mercury retrograde is having a conjunction right with this Saturn and Pluto. And I mean, what's a more mercurial sea figure than an otter, a playful little otter? And it is such a it's such an opposite from the idea of Saturn and the old man. It's sort of that puer and senex quality of like this youthful, this innocence, this, inner child versus these responsibilities and this, aging and containment versus all the openness of the sea. And to me,
Mhm.
that's a pretty revelatory transit as far as where
Oh,
those two
yeah. That's
things come in.
huge.
Yeah,
That's
once in a
huge when
lifetime.
her progressed sun is at 2 degrees Aquarius. So that means it did not long ago changed signs. And then right now it's conjunct Mercury retrograde, progressed Mercury retrograde, exactly by degree. And it's on transiting Pluto at 3 degrees Aquarius, which is opposite her natal Saturn at 2 degrees Leo. So
Yeah.
she's even more. This is something you can't ignore. And as I said before, I love what Nick Dagan Best says about Pluto. He says it makes small things big and big things small, which is kind of just a very sort of, tagline. But what's interesting is, he's like, if someone is on top of the world and they say, "Oh, I'm doing great in life and I have a great career and all this great money and blah 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 blah," and then they have a Pluto transit, then it's usually like, "Oh no," they may just lose everything. However, if they are kind of an underdog or something like that, or not powerful or not have had gotten the attention or those kinds of things, the Pluto coming can actually empower them. So I
Yeah.
think that even no matter how tough the Pluto opposite Saturn may have been, because Pluto first may come along as the eliminator of what it actually can help to sort of restructure and rebuild, that Saturn, because Saturn is going to find a way to create another foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking at transiting Jupiter is also on the progress Mars that's now direct. There's a lot of intriguing Venus progress near the ascendant. But I think
Yes, yeah,
that
I
Sun
thought that was
Mercury
interesting.
with Pluto and Saturn is everything here. That is such a powerful configuration.
Oh, and I was also going to say the other thing is a solar eclipse, a lot of times, if it's affecting you personally, and like you said, it's trining her sun, Neptune, conjunction at 11 degrees Sagittarius. Like that is really significant, which I think is perfect that she's having this dream and this depth analysis on the dream, because that to me is saying, something important is coming through a dream. But oftentimes a solar eclipse, we think about what is eclipse, and it's like the sun, the consciousness, the identity, and we tend to tie our identity to like either our job or our role in the family, either in career or family. These are things we tend to tie that sense of identity to. Also, men in our lives can often be eclipsed. So our father figures, the men that again, we project our anima onto. Um, and so I would think there is likely this sense of that maybe this male archetype of either the father or the protector or the whatever. To me, this dream is almost saying that the feminine is what is going to save, save life, save the
Yes.
future, save creation, or something like that. And that might be tied into some kind of shift in her identity that's happening.
Yeah. Super feminine, caring, compassionate, maybe a surrender component to those things. Yeah, I absolutely think that that is a big it's a big theme. And when you look at the chart in general, and we see so much fire and air, those being masculine signs, not necessarily masculine in the sense of gender, but in the more outgoing nature that they tend to be, more than this receptive, taking in, vulnerable, slower sort of state. So even though there was and maybe let's pay attention to that urgency, right? There's this urgency around tenderness and awe of life, maybe even just because of how small, and delicate the sea otter was, and then returning it to the ocean, which we think, the ocean is, we we came from the ocean and we leave by the
Definitely.
ocean, so to speak.
And also, you said before something about this sort of dichotomy or balance needed between career and home life. And the progressed moon is, in the 10th, going over the 10th natal house, which it's and very close to the midheaven, like maybe 4 months ago it was on the midheaven. So there may be still this desire to, and it's in Libra, which is also very creative about aesthetics and things, as well as things like relationships and diplomacy. But with the solar eclipse in the fifth house of creativity, the moon and progressed moon in Libra in the 10th house, possibly, finding ways to bring the creative into her ambitions. Oh, I'm
That
sorry,
is
it's her 11th house. It's 11th
yeah.
whole sign house. So, but still, it was on the midheaven,
It
which
was on
is
the midheaven, yeah.
very,
So,
it's very, a sensitive point when it comes to your life direction and
yes,
ambitions.
absolutely.
All right.
Oh,
Well, I think
yeah.
hopefully we did her some justice, and I will say I would love to hear some feedback from her. So, Miss uh, Wine Importer, please let us know what you think. All right. So, how about we move on to the next stream?
Right. So I'm just gonna get my chart all set up here. Um, and yes, so our next dream is by a 43-year-old trans femme non-binary person who is an electrician. And this dream happened on March 28th at 5:51 a.m. I'm walking through an open pasture, which is an old family horse farm on my mother's side, with a friend of mine who is an apprentice, an electrician apprentice. We were in the clearing of a field with a huge forest all around us. Tall green pines. Walking towards us just so happened to be Frodo and Sam, which are the hobbits. As my apprentice and I walk along, I mention that we could glimpse a glorious sunrise from a gorgeous tree that was about half a mile to the southeast. No sooner had I spoken, we both turned to the east to watch the sun rise swiftly into the morning sky at a rate so quick I even made mention of it. At that point, it was evident that a solar eclipse was taking place. Once the sun had risen to its highest point, it began to immediately fall and change size. It was actually now a full moon that was at least 4 times the diameter of the original sphere. As the moon came crashing down on the horizon, a great ring of flame circled the circumference of the earth, not washing over it and burning, but just a ring of fire. My apprentice and I started spinning wildly all around in a smaller circle. I could see that the hobbits had hit the ground. They weren't dead, they were just lying there. And my apprentice and I kept looking at each other as we spun, then reached out to one another for stability. We managed to stand, embracing each other as the fire subsided and the world stopped spinning, both of us standing firm. I immediately woke up and checked the time. It was exactly 5:51 a.m. And I will say the apprentice mentioned was referenced as she was once one of my apprentices, an electrician. So the feelings in the dream, at first I was very happy to be walking in this place and excited to see where we were going. As the dream took hold, I was in awe of the sheer forces I was beholding, yet I do not recall being frightened. I felt as if a great reckoning was taking place as we spun. It felt as if we would be pulled apart, but we each seemed to have the resolve to make it through. By the end, I recall waking so quickly, not necessarily panicked, but questioning what it was all about. And so, some life context for this dreamer: there are sudden changes to bring about new paths. They mentioned I'm an electrician, but they're not currently working. And there's been a focus on many changes, both physically and spiritually, especially in the last couple months. Heightened intuition and opening myself up more and more from a heart centric space. What a dream!
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Dream of an eclipse on an eclipse.
What a dream!
Let's see. And
What
interesting.
stops?
Well, the it starts with walking in an open pasture, which didn't we have a dream last time that was an
Yeah,
open pasture or
a
something
farm
too?
too. Yeah.
And a farm that said old family horse farm, horse on my mother's side. Um, and horses, so it may have, but it's on the mother's side, so it's familiar to them about this pasture. Um, and so open pasture to me, I'm thinking new horizons. And also, the one thing that really stood out to me too was when they said that after the moon came crashing down, on the horizon was a great ring of flame circling the circumference of the earth, like a ring of fire. Remember that great American solar eclipse? I think last year was it? And I had a friend who went to see it, who went into the totality zone of totality, and they were at a park, like an open park, and they could see the horizon, and it was like a ring of fire all over the horizon. She showed me a video of it, and I was like, wow, like I did not know that that was a thing. And I've been studying eclipses for over a decade. But so that genuinely is a thing. Like it looks it looked like a horizon, like all over 365, 360 degrees. And that really, I really get a sense of a whole new horizon, like a whole new, and this person said that they're embarking on a lot of changes, physical changes and spiritual and mental and everything, that it looks like, becoming a new person. And the apprentice relationship is really interesting because they call them a friend, but was also an apprentice. Um, and, an apprentice is someone that is there to, you know, like learn from you. Like the teacher is there to impart something for the apprentice. And it almost seems like near the end, there was more of an equalizing because they were both, holding each other like equally. We were in this together kind of thing. So I feel like that there is some transforming from maybe an unequal relationship to more of an equal relationship there. There could be, external. It could also be about, the integration of the self, you know.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I was picking up on as well. First thing when I was especially watching the rise of the sun, the eclipse of the sun, which we all know an eclipse of the sun is being eclipsed by the moon, to then have a full moon present. And when I think about this sun quality and it turning into the moon, we see this individual, this me-centered identity space, and then it's turning into this more reflective, connected, um, y- you know, uh, other, I don't want to say projection, but just like, that moon quality of being able to connect and reflect. And the only reason we see the moon is because of the sun. There are an it's inescapable pair for the moon basically to be connected to the sun there. And there was these themes also going on with Sam and Frodo. And I'm not a Hobbit person. I had to go look up. I'm like, okay, I kind of know who Frodo is. Who's Sam? And I found it interesting that Sam and Frodo, Sam was the steadfast companion and servant to Frodo, and really supported Frodo in the difficult parts of his journey. Even carrying him when he was too weak to go on. And so there's this loyalty, there's this courageousness. Um, and there's a quest essentially. These two figures are connected to this quest-like quality, and so seeing that support in both the Sam and Frodo, who laid down during the event, right? They weren't dead, but they took a rest, so to speak, which is interesting. And so the two characters in the dream, the dreamer and then the apprentice, there was this realization, like you said, that they had to hold on to one another. Like the only way to get through this turning and this reorientation that was essentially taking place, maybe even like trial by fire, it wasn't fire, but trial by fire in the ring. Um, and there being this connection to opening myself up in the waking reality, this heart-centric space, and also this feeling of a great reckoning and resolve also feels like union to me too. And so it takes this from this very sun identity, which happened quick, it rised quick, but then all the action happened in the lunar space. And so I will tell you though, if this were my dream, and I have had dreams where full moons are present, like huge full moons, because the full moon was 4 times the size of the sun, right? In this dream. And I've had those dreams too, and they are always the most profound dreams. Like they'll strike you because it's just hitting in a place that might be hard to explain, but it will change you.
I felt like this was extremely important dream,
Yeah.
because of, the dreamer even said they were sort of just in awe of what was happening. And then to see the moon like suddenly fall down, like it's almost like we are powerless to the forces of the universe. But there's bigger things happening. There's bigger things happening within you, and you're part of the universe. And the other thing, that, in the Dreamwise book, or I think we were talking about recently, one of the chapters, they say that sometimes when crazy things happen in a dream, and, our dream ego was kind of like, oh, okay, like not completely freaked out or whatever, then one of the things to ask yourself is, how would I act in real life? Like, what if I actually did see, the sun and moon falling from the sky? How would I respond? And maybe you would respond in, that, oh my God, there's an emergency, or however that would be. um, Maybe ask yourself, maybe there is something that the dream maker, your unconscious, is trying to say it's time to pay attention to this because this is something like really big, even if in the dream you're nonchalant, it's time to get chalant about something. Um, but I do like that I think this theme, is of the apprentice and the loyal friend and the everything is so prevalent in a lot of these, Lord of the Rings and a lot of these, tales from, ancient tales about humanity going on quests and, odysseys and things like that, that you have to have someone there that we have total, complete trust in one another, and like that you will save them and they will save you. And I even heard on a podcast recently that someone said these days, like especially in America, you know that you have a friend when when you think about who will hide me if I need to be hidden, I mean, it's that level of like, these are your ride or die, and so when we think of if in the dream, every character is some facet of ourselves, that apprentice could also be like, are you really devoting yourself to what is really most important to you, to your values, to your most important relationships? And the fact that the dreamer said they were going through, a shift even in their job. Like they've been trained as an electrician, they're not working now. Maybe they haven't been drawn to pursuing that path, and likely that there's something else big that wants to open up. And now is the time to be open to the sensations of what is it that you want to give yourself to, what do you want to devote to as an apprentice, right, to something that's more important than you, but what you can offer the world.
I love that. And I really think that speaks to also Sam and Frodo being there because wasn't Frodo is the ring bearer, the one who has the ring, right? And when you think about the ring being this place of, you think about a wedding band, it's a commitment, it's a devotion, the circle, it's like never ending. There's like a contractual sort of energy that's around the ring, which I think didn't, I mean, I know, I've never seen The Lord of the Rings. Can you believe that? I played the Lego
What?
game, but I've never seen The Lord of the
I
Rings.
have to say, I
Oh
had no
my.
choice because my husband used, when we first were dating 20 some years ago, he would watch it. Well, when we were, more than just dating, but like he would go to sleep watching this movie every night. He had to have it on the TV. So yeah,
That's
and I
funny.
eventually realized like, oh, this is actually really good, because I wasn't into fantasy anything at the time, but I do recommend it.
So my understanding from what I've read from Google is that Frodo has the ring and the quest is to go destroy it in the fires of Mount Doom. Is that correct? Am I
That does
saying that
sound
correct?
familiar. That does sound
Um,
familiar. I remember there was that crazy, what was that? There was that one character. Remember you've seen that character that had like no hair and looked like all the gremlin kind of thing.
oh
I forgot
yeah,
his name.
uh-huh.
And he was obsessed. He was like too obsessed with the ring. It was my precious, and there was something about like being overly obsessed with like getting the gold or getting whereas I believe, the hobbits, if you will, Sam and Frodo, um, they had some kind of noble cause, right? Like I think they had to get the ring, not for themselves. Like Frodo wasn't getting it for himself, but I thought he had to deliver it somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, I read that he had to destroy it, but if I'm wrong, disregard people because I do not know from firsthand experience. I am reading AI and it's not always right. But just thought that was interesting, the whole having the quest for these two companions to be about, getting a ring to a certain place so it can be destroyed in fire. And
Mhm.
then we have this earth on
Yeah.
fire
It
and that
does
is a
get
circular ring, you
it
know.
does get destroyed in fire. That much I remember.
Okay. And then, so that's an interesting little doubling parallel with this particular dream because the Earth, as they explain it, has a ring of fire, but it's not consuming the Earth. It's just creating sort of this ring-like presence that is of fire. Um and the whole spinning, and I think you mentioned this earlier, this, being in awe of the forces of nature, the forces of life, and how do you maneuver certain things that are out of your control? Because the best we can do a lot of times is stand our ground and then rely on other people, which I think is a big theme here, whether that, we're relying, there's themes of this partnering, relying on each other, relying on friends, and relying on ourselves. Sometimes maybe there's a part of ourselves that we have to be companions with so we can stand our ground for stability by connecting with this other side of ourself, which gets the ring and the wholeness there too. Yeah.
All right, let's look at
We,
some
oh
chart.
my God, the chart. The chart. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Can you see it all right, Christina?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, so we have our 43-year-old dreamer here in the center, and then right now we have the transits up. And so, I mean, and the dreams was said to take place on March 28th at 5:51. And I don't know the dreamer's location, so I just have it set for Pacific time. But if it was around that time, we were dealing with the Pisces moon, which was in the stellium of the Pisces energy before it got to the solar eclipse. But uh I do, we have to point out the fact that this solar eclipse at 9 degrees of Aries is exactly opposed their natal moon in Libra. Like, if that's not giving full moon, full moon vibes, I don't know what is.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. And they were born with a Neptune Venus conjunction in the 12th house in Sagittarius. And at the time, there is a Neptune Venus conjunction in Pisces, essentially
Yes.
squaring their Neptune Venus. And what that made me think of is, oftentimes when I see Venus in the 12th house, one of the first things I think of is like unrequited love. I mean, I'm sure we've almost everyone has had some kind of unrequited love, in life, like as you do growing up. But that theme seems to be, especially when it's conjunct to Neptune, a couple of things. It could have been like a loss that just always sort of resonated with someone, of like either a loss of love or, and Venus doesn't always have to just be about love. It can also be, there's other themes as well. But I tend to think that our relationship to love and Venus themes of values and relationships, maybe there can be a sense of, never will, I've lost something of real value early in life, and I might always at times be defeatist and feel like I could never really get what I want because of that. But it can also be, Venus, and Neptune together can be like a ethereal, like otherworldly, like, you know, I'd rather yearn for something that something or someone and never really get it in this earthly realm because it needs to be so perfect in my mind and my spirit. It can be like putting someone up on a pedestal and not wanting them to come down from it, right? Not wanting them to be an actual real human being. And I just
Yeah.
wonder how these themes were happening as the Neptune Venus is squaring the natal Neptune Venus, about, and it can be the distortions in seeing other people, or even the distortions of, you know, maybe feeling unloved or unlovable or something like that. Um, but I think when it comes to being able to have like in the dream, like a friend that was really there for one, and a lot of a lot of the talk nowadays is like we put so much into having the one relationship, the one marriage, the one, like that we forget about real friendships can be so fulfilling in life. And sometimes, not everybody needs to be married, not everybody needs to be monogamous, but we can really open our hearts and really experience a different kind of love, but when it comes to that agape kind of love where you really care for another and you know, together you share in this humanity, that could also be a Venus Neptune type of experience.
Yeah, I love that. And you're making me think of there's a fantastic book by I think Richard Eidemann. I think I'm saying his wit name right. That he's called Through the Looking Glass, and it's a great book on his lectures about relationship astrology. And he goes into saying
Mm.
what you were talking about right now with the four different kinds of love that are partners, and agape being one of them, which is very Libran by nature, although I think he equates it with Aquarius. But there, our partners or who we partner up with or our ideal partner cannot cover all these bases. Like, you can't be Eros and agape both, you know. There has to be this you we get our fill from many relationships in our life. And to double down on the relationship theme, that Venus Neptune conjunction is in the natal chart in Sag in the 12th house is ruling that 10th house moon in Libra, but that's being eclipsed right now. So that eclipse is actively, especially if we have an eclipse that is especially squaring or opposing a planet, you bet that planet is ready to be changed. And the moon happens to rule our dreamer's descendant too. So we're getting seventh house themes that are coming in with Mars right near the Mars transiting in Cancer, right near the dreamer's north node too. And so we're having these, once again, seventh house themes. And the eclipse itself is taking place in the fourth house, which makes sense for the dream to start on the family farm, right? The where we
Mm.
start is sort of this family, this root, where we come from. Horses are very Sagittarian when we think of,
Yeah.
12th house are also large animals. And horses are so powerful too. So thinking about our dream starting in this familiar yet, powerful animal place. And just the clearing, we think about the clearing, like everything is there's space. And it's surrounded by the forest, but there's space. And that to me is very a fourth house theme, space in the land. Um, and yeah, that's what I'll say here. But that seventh house connection with the moon coming in, and when we do look at the progress chart in a few minutes here, I think that's gonna be reinforced as well.
Hmm. One of the things I notice is all of the person's planets, I mean, with the exception of, you know, Chiron, which is planetoid, but everything else is above the horizon, right? And that typically is a life of, you know, being engaged with the external, you know, with the outer world, with other people, with career or with my ambitions or my aspirations or things like that. But the self-development, the real knowing yourself and what I need and who I am beyond my, you know, this external identity, that is really important to develop. And, you know, the fact that the eclipse is in the fourth house, the solar eclipse in the fourth house, you know, the North Node is just starting, you know, has just come from the fourth house, is going through the third house. So this is like really, this person is going through a major, you know, by transit, these experiences that are really taking them, saying that the most important development right now is developing your inner self, your understanding of yourself, and managing your anger, managing your, and I just say because, you know, with Aries ruling the fourth house, sometimes there is this maybe hidden or suppressed maybe anger or sort of that Aries assertiveness or, you know, that kind of energy, but understanding yourself and how you respond to life in that way and how you want to manage yourself more so that you understand who you are, how you react to things rather than just having to always, you know, reach for greater heights. You got the moon and Saturn and Mercury and Jupiter and Pluto all in the 10th whole sign house, and the sun right next to it in the 11th house, conjunct the midheaven. That's a lot of energy for most of the life is taking you out in the world, is, having to be responsible, having to either be an authority or deal with authorities, things like that. But now it's not about the authority. It's about who I am, what I want, how I'm reshaping and reforming myself, what kind of family environment that I might want to create for myself, my home environment and things like that. And, with that eclipse happening in the fourth house, that is, again, the home environment, maybe questioning things from the family, the ancestry, what needs to change, what needs to be eclipsed. Again, like maybe even influences from the father, of what your identity should be. And yeah, so no wonder it's such a powerful eclipse because it's
Yeah.
opposing everything this person normally knows about themselves in their life.
Yeah, well, and I love that you bring that up because think about it. The beginning of the dream was the old family farm, like what's familiar, what I probably grew up with. And then we're ending with the world spinning and everything is changing and there's just like this magnificence and this awe happening. And I love that you pointed out this external reality. And we had talked earlier about this, the sun actually being eclipsed in real life, but also in this dream. And like our previous dreamer, we also have a Pluto transit going on with Pluto
Mhm.
squaring the midheaven and the sun right now,
Wow, that's
too. That's
huge.
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 So, the whole sense of identity is breaking down and being rebuilt. And so is the career with it. And I know there was mention that they are an electrician, but they're not currently working. And so there can be, especially Pluto in the second, maybe there's a lot of money issues that are going around there. Maybe there could be self-esteem issues, but also a rebuilding of skills and greater self-worth and value. And having that midheaven and that 10th house energy, but also in the 11th house of friendships and community. And, we see the apprentice there. We see the two friends of Sam and Frodo in the dream and how that is morphing and shaping too. And especially since the solar eclipse, which is opposing the moon, also plays into the fact that Mercury stationed there, Venus stationed there. We've had all this
Mhm.
activity in opposition to this dreamer's moon, which lights up that seventh house space, but also, as Christina pointed out, lights up this 10th house space. And who I am, how I partner, what I agree to, what I look like, very aesthetic Libra in the public sphere. And so this is getting this chart this chart is getting
Yeah,
all the
yes. And I
activity.
would say, because I've been saying that 9 degrees of the cardinal signs is such a hot degree right now. And like you said, especially for that person because it's been opposing their moon, which is again where we seek satisfaction and comfort and familiarity, which for them has oftentimes been, something to do with public image or ambition. But this is a transformative time for them, and they should keep an eye on when Mercury and Venus, pass their post shadow and they pass that 9 degrees Aries again, which is, let me see, I don't know the date off the top of my head. I can look it up, but because that will be significant too, because when these planets stationed, they started a whole journey, and it may be sort of having to revise all the things that they feel are familiar and they feel are part of their sense of home, if you will.
Yeah. That's and so when and so they happen to be an eighth house perfection year too, which 43 is always a very intriguing year for experience because we're going through eighth house energies. And this particular chart, since it's a Capricorn rising chart, is we have the sun as the time lord. So here we are seeing once again this solar, the sun has the mic in the chart right now, is getting that Pluto activity. And then if you're watching our video, I've added the progressions in the middle wheel of this chart. And the progressed moon just moved into Taurus a few months ago and happens to be making a sort of this full
Wow.
moon opposition with the sun in the midheaven in the natal chart. So we have another full moon sort of energy pairing. And progressed Jupiter is also on the sun right now too. So we are
Wow.
just getting all the in the moon on the IC. So once again, the family farm, right? Isn't that very family farm? Moon on the IC, Taurus. Yes. That's this is a
Yeah.
big transit
And
for
I
this
think the other
individual.
thing I want to also point is, yes, Pluto is squaring the Sun MC that sits conjunct at 2 degrees Scorpio. But, when Pluto squares the midheaven, it's also squaring the IC.
Yes.
So it is this, and believe me, I just went through it myself like a year or so ago. So it's not only, looking at these, what is toxic and in decay, not only in my ambitions and career, but also in my sense of, again, the IC is the root of the chart, your inner self, your relationship to your family, and how that continues to inform you, and where you want to root. And so it's a really important, and really significant. I mean, the Pluto square the sun alone is like, my identity needs to completely metamorphosize, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that it's also the midheaven and the IC involves, it's like the midheaven's kind of the compass, right? The direction of where I'm headed, and the IC of where I've been,
Absolutely.
I've come from.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, this is a powerful dream. This is a powerful chart configuration.
I think there was something else too that I had seen before that was, let's see, so you have, let's see, you have the transits on the outside, right? And progressions on the inside. Yeah, and I know Venus by progression is, let's see, well, it's 29, and the natal. So, it's been some time. It's been quite some time that Venus has been going over um, the natal south node in the first house, which, as you said before, you said something about the person's appearance and things like that, and that shifting and morphing and changing. And I would think that that would be, this would be a very significant time for that too, because Venus, by progression in the first house, that's
mhm.
really coming to terms with, loving you yourself, even the reflection in the mirror, if that needs to change, if that how your appearance, like that's part of who you are in your identity, and that could be, something really coming up, that's part of this whole metamorphosis.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since Venus is so integral in this chart with ruling all the Libra energy, ruling the IC Taurus energy, and really this progressed. Sometimes we wonder, we're like, why do I feel this energy in this? The transit right now is not like interacting with any of my natal stuff. Look at your progress chart because chances are there's going to be these key moments of experience where you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that Pluto was going over my progressed Venus for the last, And so really in the last couple of years, this progressed Venus has been going through a Pluto transit, and Venus is about to move over into Aquarius. So this is like a cuspy sort of situation where,
Yeah, 29 degrees.
yeah, decades long of having Venus in this Capricorn progression is now about to move into Aquarius, which will probably take about a year time. I'm not sure what speed she's moving in within this chart, but that's going to be a big shift as well from Capricorn to Aquarius. And meanwhile,
Okay.
that progressed moon a couple months ago just squared that Venus as well.
Mm,
So there's themes around this with probably Pluto. pretty close in the mix, having to go through that.
Mhm.
So I could see where we
Mhm.
start the dream in this very comfortable, this is where I come from, this is what I know. And then now the world is spinning. There's a ring of fire. I'm trying to get my ground, but I'm supported by this presence of this other person, this friend, this side of myself. And I can stand my ground
Mhm.
in what is changing.
Yeah, and I'm guilty. I don't always look at the progressions, but after these dreams we've been seeing and how the progressions are really showing up for them, because sometimes a lot of these plants don't move very fast, and they took years to move, except for the sun and the moon, and the ascendant. Well, mostly the sun and the moon. The moon moves about, I think, a degree a month. Is it,
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
or a degree a day? I
Degree a
forget.
month.
A degree a month. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, um, but I really focus a lot on the moon. And this moon, like you said before, is on the IC, the natal IC. That is a major thing about home and roots. But any planet that is at the 29 degrees, even if it's going to be hanging out there a while, is so important to pay attention to, because that is really endings, right? It could be a long undoing of that archetype in your life.
Yeah.
But this Venus, as you said, there at the 29 degrees, about to shift into most of her life she's known, or their life they've known, the Venus in progressed Capricorn. Um, that 29 is an urgency. That's the sense of that there's some real urgency to wrap up these, Venus. I often see Venus in Capricorn as an archetype. They love to make money, or there's a love of work, or the love of helping other people make money, or things like that, or our
Status.
relationships. Yeah, and also our relationships. We love to, help other people be, more Capricornian, more effective, and have better status. And they say that a lot of Capricornian type of gifts are things like, a I don't know, like a dry cleaning certificate, or like, something practical, but that can like help you in your career or something like that. But uh, there's an ending there. And that's Venus, when she gets into Aquarius, it's going to have a whole new sense of what your values are. It's a real shift in your values. It might not be very earthbound, right? It'll be more air orientated. It'll be more idea orientated and things like that. Even if it will eventually have to do something with, the second house values and resources and finances, it's going to be really important about what the ideas are that inspire all that.
Yeah. So no November dreamer. That
Wow,
is
that's
when
coming
that
up.
will happen. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we did a good treatment. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's as good as we can for now. We'll let them sit with it and see what comes through from our analysis. So hopefully they'll have some responses for us. And what do you think, Mel? Do you think you have another one of these? You'd like to come back for another one of these podcasts with me to discuss some more dreams?
Oh, of course. It's so much fun to break these down, and we are still saving the dreams that we haven't used. So if your dream wasn't has not been talked about yet, it is potentially on ice for future.
In the hopper.
Yeah, it's in the hopper.
Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we'd love to hear your feedback. You can leave us some comments on Radiant Astrology on Instagram or Facebook, and YouTube, or on Energetic Principles, also on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and all the socials. So we thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time when we explore more dreams and astrology. Mel, do you have anything to say as we wrap up? Anything cooking for you?
What am I cooking? We're working on the end of our Tarot of Her release, hopefully launching on Kickstarter here in the next couple months with our expansion pack. So keep a lookout, tarotofher.com, energeticprinciples.com, and yeah, I guess I will say keep on dreaming, my friends.
Perfect. All right, my friends, take care and record those dreams. You never know when you're going to want us to take a look at them for you. All right. Bye bye.